What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And before we start this video on different types of compactness, please check out both my books. They're online and they're on Amazon. There's links in the description below, so be sure to check that out. And I'm using efficiency match this time to make this video. So as we see here from the setup, we have a Chelsea inspired structure in possession of the ball with their 3-4-3, if that's what you want to call it, with two attacking midfielders in the double pivot, with a three-man back line at the base of the structure, and against a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-2-2. And we're going to get into different structures and variations of these two structures based on the third of the field and how they impact compactness. The three different types of compactness that we're going to be talking about is horizontal compactness, which is essentially the distance a team covers from one sideline to the other. So here it would be from the furthest fullback or furthest wide midfielder to the weak side, and the connections they have horizontally with each other. There's vertical compactness, which we'll look at next, which is the space between each horizontal line within the team. So it's the space between the forwards and the midfielders and the midfielders and the defenders. Then finally, we'll look at diagonal compactness, which is something we only really look at when the team is pressing in the wide area or is shifting into a wider position. We start in the mid block looking at compactness because this is the most versatile third of the field when it comes to compactness. So teams typically have to span the full width, and here we'll see the ball move into the wide area, and depending on how the team shifts impacts the different lines very differently. So here, if we have the midfield shift over in more of a staircase fashion, we see that compactness horizontally is still maintained, but then vertically compactness will most likely decrease in terms of control that the team has. So with the midfielders moving deeper to accommodate this shifting, the defensive line will almost also do so to have a better angle to cover the pass in behind, because if the back line were to stay high and the midfielders were to drop, we can see a lot of spaces created in behind, and it would be a much easier pass to play into from this position in the wide area. A diagonal pass can be played, and with inverted runs through the half space, vertical passes and diagonal forward passes can easily get in behind the back four. So with this, vertical compactness decreases, spatial control decreases in central areas because of the distance created from the midfield four and the back four. Now our central forwards can shift over as well, so our horizontal compactness primarily stays the same, but now our vertical compactness decreases. And one thing to note is that using the full width a lot of times does require the defensive team to span a little bit further, a little bit wider, when being a little bit more man-oriented. So it does decrease horizontal compactness a little bit, but it also gives the team more time to then shift into these positions when the ball is played. So the whole idea of now minimum width is now perhaps horizontal compactness is increased and we have more control centrally. Players are more tightly connected, but now when the pass occurs, they have less time to shift because it's a shorter passing distance, and then the on-ball action can be quick enough to take the defender right out of the picture. Whereas if he's wide, the pass will travel a longer distance, and now the player has more time to shift over, and now the player's first touch cannot take him past the defensive player shifting to him. So sometimes manipulating a defense's compactness isn't so black and white as to using the full width of the field to stretch horizontally the team, but rather how does your team in possession look to progress, and does it require stretching the horizontal connections, or does it require tighter passing angles and tighter offensive connections? So now we can look at vertical compactness, and as we said before, that's the space between the lines. And from here, we often look teams stretch this vertical compactness through attraction and through their first line passes in their build-up phase. So if we have bounce passes between central defenders or circulation, a lot of times this can be a signal for teams to jump and start to press. So as they start to press, the wingback may come into a deeper position, and now we see teams jumping, trying to maintain vertical compactness when they press. So the vertical compactness would be maintained through vertical partnerships. So the number 10 presses the ball, the number 8 would then also jump to press the opposing team's number 10 or their near side holding midfielder. So these simultaneous actions maintain their connection vertically, and this can be seen in other areas of the field as well. So typically our winger and wide midfielder are also partnered vertically in terms of vertical connections. So if the wide midfielder cheats to then go and press the wing back, then typically our fullback, if he's not already pinned, can cheat further forward to gain access and decrease the space between the lines. So one way teams undo this vertical connection and vertical partnership and undo vertical compactness altogether is through pinning. So if we simply have our 9 move over, now the fullback is more likely to be pinned to his starting position. Or if we have an alternative concept, our 9 is deeper, now maybe our interior midfielders move higher. Now 2 players are pinning the back 4, and our 9 has more of a free roll. So now with our 9 joining our 3-man midfield we just created, it's more likely that a vertical pass can reach him, and exposing the lack of vertical compactness the team has when pressing. Now finally, we're going to look at diagonal compactness in the midfield third. So when the fullback receives the ball, the diagonal pass in between the lines is what will be most dangerous for the team in possession. So the team out of possession will look to decrease the odds of this happening. So one way they do this is through diagonal compactness. And this just is exactly how it sounds on diagonal players. And this is when players on different horizontal and vertical lines then pair up and form partnerships across the field. And this deters the team from playing diagonal passes into dangerous areas from wider positions. So we have the 7 and the 10 on the blue team connected through their diagonal partnership now, and now covering them is the deeper 8 and the slightly jumping fullback. So depending on the shifting principles, the height may change between these 2 players, and then joining them as well is a number 9 coming into a deeper position to prevent a horizontal pass, breaking the press altogether. So we have 1 diagonal line, 2 diagonal lines, and then now a 3rd diagonal line, preventing any 3rd line passes diagonally and breaking the structure altogether. So this is very effective, and some teams that do this best in the world, probably Atletico Madrid. When the ball goes into the wide area, they very rarely get caught out by diagonal compactness because of their staggering between their diagonal lines and the spatial control these diagonal lines create among the defensive team. Now so far we have only looked at compactness in terms of the midfield third, and the midfield third has the most variability because of the defensive line has full control on where they set the offsides line, and when there are deeper runs, a lot of times the defensive line will drop off because there's enough space to be beaten in behind through the run of play, whereas if the ball goes into a deeper position now to the goalie in their initial build-up third, compactness changes for the defensive team very drastically. So now with the ball in the first third of the opposing team's build-up, vertical compactness changes as well as horizontal compactness. So vertical compactness changes and pretty much gets undone due to the offsides rule of the halfway line. So when a first line pass is initiated and the press then is invited, we have our 4-1-3-2, so our increase in the number of horizontal lines in our defensive phase as a result of this undoing of the vertical compaction. So this increase in horizontal line is a direct result in the team trying to maintain vertical connections among their team and having the most spatial control possible. So in this 4-1-3-2 now, we have our first line pressing to jump, and now our vertical partnerships are still a key concept in the success of this pressing in the third. So we have our 4-1-3-2, our two forwards go slightly higher now to press the opposing team in their first line action. And we can even have our wide midfielders cheat and jump. So what we see then is more man orientation because of the space through the half spaces and between the lines and in wide areas. So man orientation is used to limit the use of this space and force the teams to beat each player individually. What is also used is positional superiority to prevent the use of this excess of space. So the most common way is through a cover shadow. When the 9 presses, he goes to press using his cover shadow, blocking the 8, and now our deeper midfielder, our 8, can create dual roles to then have access to the passing lane through the half space and the third line pass that would break the defensive press, and he would also have access to the player in the number 9's cover shadow, the red 8. So this matchup would create dual roles. One, the player would be deeper to then have access to the passing lane as well as covering the pressing player's cover shadow. Now the last area of the field which we'll talk about compactness is our low block. So this is obviously the most dangerous space to be protecting, but you also have the least amount of space to protect, and that's pretty much around your 18-yard box through defending in crossing positions, through wide areas, but mainly prioritizing central goal scoring positions as your focus for your spatial control. So what we have is the least distance between lines and the most numerical numbers in your last line of defense and your second to last line of defense. So generally teams will increase the number of players in either their midfield or their defensive line, and this gives them a better access point to the wide areas and maintains horizontal connections when shifting. So if we think about it, if we didn't have this increase in numerical numbers, which you don't always have to, but teams can be more susceptible to switching long diagonal switches to then access space. So it just makes it a little bit easier and makes shifting quicker, so they're less likely to be broken in circulation. So our 5-man back line we have here not only shifts across quicker because of the less distance, but they also help in spatial control between the lines. So if we have an advancing central defender with the ball drawing out a wide midfielder, we then can more easily create a vertical partnership with a same side central defender in the wide central defending position. So what this happens is then we can shift our other 2 defenders across, still maintain numerical superiority at the back, have a central defender jumping between the lines, and have our midfielders shifting over as well. So what this does is this vertical partnership here maintains vertical compactness, makes horizontal compactness easier because of the increase in the defensive line, and concedes space in less dangerous areas, which is in front of their defensive block. So that's going to wrap up the analysis. I hope you guys have a better understanding of vertical, horizontal, and diagonal compactness, and I'll see you in the next video.